Throughout history, the act of wearing a costume or mask has carried profound spiritual significance. Across ancient civilizations, masks were never just decorative or theatrical, they were portals. In early pagan rituals, tribal ceremonies, and occult traditions, masks were used to blur the boundary between the physical and the spiritual world. When a person covered their face, they were believed to surrender their human identity so that a spirit, deity, or demonic force could temporarily inhabit them. The mask became a vessel, a symbolic and energetic gateway that allowed the unseen realm to merge with the visible. This practice appears in countless cultures. In ancient Egypt, masks were used during burial rites to guide the soul through the underworld. In Greek theater, performers wore masks to embody gods and archetypes. In African and native traditions, ceremonial masks were used to channel the presence of deities or elemental spirits. Even in Roman festivals like Saturnalia, the ancient root of modern masquerades and Halloween, disguises allowed people to invert identity and hierarchy for a night, invoking chaos and misrule as forms of spiritual expression. Spiritually, the act of covering one's face or taking on another image represents a temporary exchange of essence. The person behind the mask surrenders a portion of their energetic signature and takes on the vibration, personality, or spirit associated with that image. This is why ancient priests, shamans, and occult practitioners were so careful about what they wore. They understood that garments and symbols carry frequency. The outer covering always connects to an inner energy. When modern culture treats costumes and imitation as harmless entertainment, particularly those tied to darkness, vanity, or occult imagery, it unknowingly repeats the same spiritual pattern. What once was ritual has now become recreation, but the spiritual law of embodiment remains the same. What you wear, you invite. When you assume a likeness born of fear, lust, rebellion, or idolatry, you momentarily align with that energy. The spirit realm recognizes resemblance more than intention. This is why Halloween and other costume-centered celebrations hold such strong spiritual undercurrents. The tradition of disguising oneself to ward off evil spirits dates back to Samhain, an ancient Celtic festival that marked the thinning of the veil between the living and the dead. People would wear grotesque masks and costumes, not only to blend in with wandering spirits, but also to channel or manipulate their presence. Over time, that evolved into the modern celebration where costumes still carry those same spiritual frequencies, even if the participants are unaware. So when someone puts on a mask or costume, especially one inspired by vanity, death, seduction, or occult symbolism, they are doing more than changing their appearance. They are symbolically participating in a spiritual ritual of transformation, one that can temporarily exchange identity, invite energetic influence, or imprint the soul with the vibration of what they are portraying. In short, a mask is never just a mask. It is a spiritual declaration, a signal in the unseen realm of what energy you're willing to embody and what kingdom you're aligning yourself with, even for a moment. In the unseen realm, what you wear is never neutral. Every color, symbol, and image carries resonance because creation itself responds to agreement. Heaven and hell both recognize alignment, not words. What you put on, whether it's a literal garment, a public persona, or an emotional posture, announces which atmosphere you are inviting to rest on you. From Genesis forward, clothing represented covenant. Adam and Eve's first garments were spiritual before they were physical. When sin entered, they lost that radiant covering and substituted leaves for glory. Later, Scripture repeatedly tells believers to put on righteousness, strength, humility, and the armor of God. Clothing language appears because the spiritual realm reads attire as a statement of belonging. That's why Ephesians 6:11 commands us to put on the whole armor of God. If light can be worn, so can darkness. The kingdom of darkness mimics divine principles through inversion. Where God offers armor for protection, the enemy offers disguise for deception. When a person wears imagery tied to witchcraft, rebellion, or death, even in jest, they momentarily echo the appearance of that kingdom. Spirits recognize their own symbols and respond to them. It doesn't require an intentional prayer or ritual. The visual agreement is enough for contact. This is how demonic influence travels silently, through alignment rather than invitation. The moment someone dresses like a creature of fear, lust, or vanity, they broadcast a frequency that those very spirits inhabit. They have not only changed clothes, they have tuned their spiritual signal. The law of agreement also extends beyond clothing. When you adopt the language, gestures, or aesthetic born from a culture that glorifies darkness, you participate in its covenant, even if you claim neutrality. The kingdom you imitate is the kingdom you empower. So while the world says it's just a costume, the spirit realm hears, I consent to reflect this image. And where reflection exists, recognition follows. Light draws light, and shadow draws shadow. That's why spiritual maturity calls for discernment in even the smallest choices. You were created to wear glory, not disguise. Every time you consciously clothe yourself in virtue, humility, and truth, you reinforce heaven's claim over your life. But every time you mimic darkness for entertainment, you give the counterfeit realm a brief mirror of itself to attach to. In spiritual law, appearance equals agreement, and agreement equals access. Historically, masks weren't just for entertainment, they were ritual tools. As I've mentioned, In ancient pagan and occult ceremonies, masks allowed spirits or deities to ride or inhabit the wearer. The moment the mask goes on, it becomes a portal for identity exchange. Even pretending or playing a role energetically blurs your spiritual signature. You temporarily suspend your true identity to embody another. That's why actors, influencers, and performers often struggle with mental or emotional instability, because their soul becomes fragmented between roles and realities. Spiritually, it's the same principle. When you mask yourself, you invite what that mask represents. Halloween intensifies this because it's a night of collective permission. The veil between realms thins, and people openly play with dark identities under the guise of fun. But the spirit realm doesn't recognize pretend. It only recognizes agreement. Costumes of witches, demons, vampires, zombies, or even certain celebrities are not just make-believe. They are symbols and energetic signature of that thing or that person. When someone puts on these images, they become a visual embodiment of that spirit's nature. Spirits of death, lust, witchcraft, and torment recognize their own likeness. They don't need an invitation, they respond to reflection. The moment you mirror what belongs to them, they view it as permission to draw near. This is especially true when people imitate celebrities who are openly aligned with dark or occult symbolism. Depending on what forces those celebrities have partnered with, dressing as them isn't just copying a look. It's stepping into their spiritual agreement. You're energetically wearing the same covenant, even if you think it's harmless fun. When you imitate a celebrity who's spiritually compromised, you open yourself up to the same demonic influences that control them. The spirits attached to those individuals don't just stay confined to the celebrity, they look for new vessels, new hosts who are willing to mirror their energy, their image, or their rituals. By copying their look, mannerisms, or even their stage personas, you're giving those same spirits legal access to observe and influence you. Even one time can lead to spiritual confusion, personality shifts, emotional heaviness, or even the feeling that something else has ownership over you. That's why discernment is so critical. Imitation isn't just flattery in the spiritual world, it's an open door. A costume isn't just fabric, it's a symbolic form, a vessel that carries a vibration. If that vibration originates from demonic imagery, witchcraft, or a person entangled in occult power, then by wearing it, you come into spiritual resonance with that same frequency. That's why demons don't always need to be summoned, they simply need someone to agree. When you put on their likeness, they gain permission to draw near. Just as Ephesians 6:11 tells us to put on the whole armor of God, the enemy twists this law by enticing people to put on the armor of deception. The same spiritual principle applies in reverse. Dressing in darkness opens spiritual doors for darkness. Halloween in particular amplifies this because it's the one night of the year when millions of people, consciously or not, play with identity, mock the supernatural, and embody characters from the kingdom of darkness. The collective participation creates a massive energetic permission slip, the veil thins, and imitation becomes invitation. That's why many people wake up after Halloween feeling off. Anxious, heavy, emotionally drained, or strangely disconnected. They've unknowingly stepped into energetic mimicry, and what started as pretend leaves a spiritual residue. Demons thrive on this law of agreement because they understand something most people don't. The more you stay in character, the more of you they can claim. They want you to fully embody that role, to move, think, and speak like the thing you're pretending to be. Once the vibration matches, they don't just hover, they merge. You either reflect God's image or project a counterfeit one. And the more you mask yourself, the more susceptible you become to what that mask represents. Authenticity acts as armor. Imitation opens portals. That's why it's vital to be discerning about what you put on, not just in the physical sense, but in vibration and identity. Halloween isn't just a night of costumes, it's a night of spiritual identity exchange, whether people realize it or not. When you imitate someone else's appearance, voice, or persona, you're not just copying for fun, you're stepping into their vibrational space and the spirit realm takes notice. This is the principle of a destiny swap. When a person mirrors another's energy, image, or influence, they temporarily step into that person's spiritual frequency, and in doing so, they open themselves up to the forces attached to it. On Halloween, this law plays out collectively. By dressing as a character, witch, demon, or dark archetype, you momentarily exchange identity with what you represent. You blur your divine signature, making it easier for foreign energy to enter or influence you. The longer you stay in character, the stronger the connection becomes. Demons thrive on this because they seek embodiment, not just observation. Their goal is to get you to stay and roll. When your behavior matches their nature, they no longer need to knock, they find a matching frequency and step in. This is why the costume choices that seem powerful, sexy, or iconic often carry the most danger. The spirit behind the image is seductive because it craves replication. The enemy knows that if he can't possess someone directly, he can at least get them to perform the possession, to embody it through imitation. Every Halloween, millions of people act out spiritual roles without realizing they're playing in a ritual. By aligning with energies tied to rebellion, seduction, death, or occult fame, people unknowingly open channels of exchange. This is why so many feel spiritually heavy or emotionally drained after their destiny was swapped through the costume. The demons connected to that persona may begin to ride you for the rest of your life, because when you put on that costume, you're not just dressing up, you're stepping into a spiritual covenant. And when you add drinking or drugs into the mix, those substances act as open doors, lowering your spiritual defenses and giving dark forces even greater access to influence or attach themselves to you. But there's power in awareness. When you stay anchored in your true identity, the one God designed, imitation loses its grip. Discernment, prayer, and cleansing after spiritual exposure can restore your frequency and seal your energy. Your destiny is not a costume. It's sacred. Never trade your spiritual signature for temporary attention or imitation, especially on nights when the veil is thinnest and darkness parades as fun. Remember, every kingdom has a uniform. Heaven's attire is holiness, light, and truth. The kingdom of darkness operates through distortion, disguise, and desecration. Don't let the enemy disguise deception as self-expression. Your image was made in the likeness of God. Wear that proudly.